Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Buckeye Weekly Podcast. I'm Tony Gerdeman, here as always with Tom Orr. Tom, how's it going?
Tony, it was a beautiful, beautiful day at Ohio State. Got to watch a little football. We don't get to spend a lot of time watching games here, so you always enjoy getting to be here. Tony, there was only one play in the second half that I missed because I thought, well, I'm going to run in real quick and change, throw my
I wonder if I can guess.
My digital memory card over on the hard drive, so that was pretty good. Only one play in the whole second half.
Which play was that?
The one where Cardinal Tate caught a football and would have basically landed on my feet if I had been standing where I was 45 seconds ago. Tony, spring football is about learning for everyone. It's a good time to make mistakes, you learn, you get better, and then you're ready to play when the bullets start flying for real in the fall.
I thought you may have missed that one because you sent me a text saying, I think we're all going to go over on our bold predictions. And I was like, oh, maybe you are. That was one of mine, and it hit. But, 40-31, defense beats the offense. Gray over Scarlet, just as I had predicted.
When was that?
Yeah. It wasn't part of the show, but we are here in the team, the post-game media room, as you see. Everybody's wrapping up. People are milling about.
Lots of guest stars today.
Getting ready to leave.
Lots of cameos. Basically like Love Boat.
Hopefully no F-bombs going on. But overall, and we don't have the stats just yet, Kyle McCord hitting that throw to Carnell Tate makes things look better. I've seen some people that are a little concerned about the lack of offense, but you're looking for an offensive line. You're missing a bunch of receivers, as Ryan Day said. So I'm never going to be too concerned. Although, as I did tweet, Brian Hartline running the ball with Archie Griffin, is he going to favor the seniors and the upperclassmen too much, and he won't give the young guys a chance?
Yeah, it's not super encouraging that out of the running back room, Chip Trainum probably had the best run of the day, but Archie Griffin, maybe the second best offensive play of the day. Not exactly what you're looking for.
But somebody tweeted to me, is he using his COVID year?
Yes. And he actually has a year from the Spanish flu. That's how long ago he played at Ohio State. It's. I think if you listen to us talk about football practice this spring and watching this team and how things have generally gone when we've gotten to see them, I don't think that anything you saw today should come as a huge surprise. I think you saw an offensive line that is very obviously a work in progress, and why Ryan Day was, had some concerns, I think, or was not totally comfortable with things when we talked to him earlier in the week. I think you saw that. I think you saw, you don't have a couple of your starting wide receivers. You don't have your running game is, you're missing Travion Henderson. You didn't have Mayan Williams. You didn't have Evan Pryor. The offense looked ragged, and the offense is sometimes going to look ragged in the spring. But you also, the flip side of that coin is, the secondary continues to look pretty darn good.
Yeah, and they did. And one of my bold predictions was 4 PBUs by the corners. I don't know the total number, but I feel pretty good about that one because Denzel Burke was fantastic. You saw Jordan Hancock out there, Davis Nigbinosin. So, yeah, I would agree with you there. The entire secondary looked pretty good. Jair Brown got beat late by, on that Carnell Tate touchdown. Overall, plenty of positives there, but I don't think people are really care about that right now because they're so concerned about the offensive line. And I can see the smoke coming off of the computer right now. But it will be interesting as we go and we do a rewatch, just focusing almost entirely on the offensive line, because there were certainly some struggles from everybody, interior and exterior, and even I don't know if it was miscommunications or what, because the defensive tackles were getting some rush from the outside, as well as I don't think the tackles and the guards weren't passing them off very well.
Yeah, and I think that if you're looking at reasons to be concerned about the offensive line, it was that disruptive, and they didn't blitz. You had some twists and stunts and stuff up front. You can play some games up front, but they didn't blitz. And you still got that kind of pressure. And, go back a week or two, we were talking about the offensive line, and I think we landed on 60-70% chance that the 5 guys who were sort of running in those 5 spots were going to be the guys who started the first game this fall. I think I'm going to lower that number from 60 or 70 to maybe 50% because it sure sounds like they are going to be active in the portal if they can be. And I know that there was an offensive lineman, a tackle out of Oklahoma State, who entered the portal officially, kind of at the first moment of the first moment that it became an option. And I think he's someone you maybe keep an eye on. That was Caleb Etienne. Mm-hmm. So that's, I think, someone you're looking at. But yeah, you get the sense that you, dear viewer at home, dear listener at home, are not the only one that recognize that, hey, the offensive line is sort of a concern right now, and that you may not have this year's solutions on the roster currently. So good news, the transfer portal is a thing now, and you can, if this was 2014, well, then there's probably, you are genuinely, legitimately concerned. I think at this point, they know it's an issue. They have expressed as publicly as they can that they know it's an issue. And so now you see who they can pull in.
Just as an aside, I'm looking at the box score. I did not see Noah Rogers' 57-yard catch.
He had a long touchdown right at the end to the. If you were watching on TV, it would be the bottom left-hand corner. Yes, I got that one. It happened to be diagonally opposite me on the field, but I do. Yes, that was from one of the walk-ons. One of the walk-ons, the first of the walk-ons to come in.
You say 50%. What if I tell you that Ohio State can get somebody that could land somebody that they want? Then what are you saying in terms of where your percentage is on this is the same offensive line that starts?
If Ohio State does land someone in the transfer portal?
If they can. If they can get somebody.
If they can get someone, I think that this 5, I think is the chances that this 5 are the starters, I think are close to zero. At this point, you're not bringing someone in to not start, and you're bringing someone in because you are raising your hand and saying this is a real concern. Now, is it possible that they bring someone in and also both tackle spots get substantially better? They're substantially more comfortable with them before the season? Absolutely, that's a possibility. And Ryan Day talked about Paris Johnson last year, having concerns about Paris Johnson in the spring and how much Paris Johnson improved over the summer. Absolutely, that's a possibility. But if you're shopping in the portal, a tackle is going to be, that is something that a lot of schools are shopping for. So there is probably going to be some resource invested in making that happen. And you're only going to do that if you're pretty confident that's someone who's going to come in and make an immediate impact for you.
Yeah, and let's also not forget, this is just 15 practices of about 45 or so. Mm-hmm. So this is not the finished product at tackle on either side. Everybody will continue to work in the offseason. But again, somebody on our message board said this is kind of a wasted spring because you didn't get to see what Donovan Jackson could do at left tackle. And my thought is you need to know if you need to move Donovan Jackson. So you needed all of spring to figure out, do you have tackles? And you got to give those guys as much time as possible in the spring because there's still plenty of time to go and be for a guy like that, a junior, to move outside over the summer and in fall camp to get used to that. So I don't think you lose anything by figuring out who can and can't play at this point.
Yeah, and I guess the question is, if they don't land someone in the portal, is that the move? Do you move Enoch Famahi to left guard and move Donovan Jackson out to left tackle and kick Josh Farr over to right tackle, and then you're kind of maybe not as good at one position but better at two? That's certainly.
Do you think that lineup is more likely than the current lineup?
I think it's probably about even because I think, I do wonder if they wish they had done a little more with that this spring because, but you kind of have to know what you got because the best of all worlds was this lineup of offensive linemen works and you don't have any concerns, and then you keep Donovan Jackson at guard and you're really good at guard and he can help out Carson Hinsman, who's right next to him and who's a first-year starter, presumably again, and they haven't given Carson Hinsman the starting job either, but he's still running with the ones. Vic Cutler's still running with the twos. We don't know what's going on with Jacob James. He's been out all spring, obviously supposed to be back, but where will he be when he comes back? The best case scenario was this offensive line comes out, gels, you're very happy with it, and then you move on and you're ready for the season. I think it is safe to say the best case scenario has not come to pass. So now you've probably got a plan A, a plan B, and a plan C. And my assumption is for example, Etienne from Oklahoma State, he's in the portal right now. He is in the portal probably knowing here are some spots that are potential landing spots for me. He didn't go into the portal probably just completely like, well, let's see. So is it him? Is it someone else? There are going to be multiple options out there, and they're going to be out there very soon. So the portal's only open for 2 weeks starting today. So at that point, 2 weeks from now, you're going to know who's an option, who's not, and you're going to be able to, go after them relatively quickly. And either you get them or you don't, and then you move on at that point with Plan A, Plan B, and Plan C, depending on if you get 0, 1, or 2.
Kevin, got any questions?
A lot of overreaction at this point.
Not overreaction, just reaction.
Instant overreaction.
So you got the Kyle McCord's numbers there.
I do have Kyle McCord's numbers. 18 of 34, 184 yards and a touchdown, long of 37, 3 sacks. And that's 18 of 34 it didn't feel like a great day for him. And 184 yards on 34 attempts is shy of 6 yards per attempt, which is not good. And I think, remember when we talked about how there were a lot of checkdowns during the course of the spring? Guess what you saw? A lot of checkdowns.
We can turn that into getting back to the secondary if you want, because they all made plays. Sonny was making plays. Kai Stokes was in there. So there's all kinds of levels in there, and Cam Martinez and Ryan Turner got a PBU. Like Jair Brown gave up that one, but I think everybody. I don't know that anybody had a bad day in the secondary. And again, Jair Brown gave up the one. I didn't see the one in Noah Rogers, but this is if you're. I know people aren't looking for positives right now because they're focused on the negatives.
But it's a beautiful spring day. I want to be mad.
Even right out of the gate, the little quick screen hitch, that Denzel Burke jumped and knocked away, and he had a couple of PBUs. That dude looks completely different.
Yes, and he spoke in the back of the room. We'll have that up on our YouTube channel later on. I recorded it and did not have time to get it posted before we hopped on the live stream. But one of the things he talked about is one of the areas he's improved is I keep wanting to say insomnia. That's not it. It's amnesia, where just you have a play. What happened in the last play? I don't know. I'm on to the next play. I can only focus on making the next play the best play I can. And that's, how often do you hear about corners talking about having a short memory? That's one of the areas where he said he's really kind of improved. And, he's someone also, you've been hearing from us all spring. This is someone who, every time you talk to people on the program, it's like you hear them talking about him and his level of focus this spring, his level of attention to detail this spring, and his level of, he's just kind of bringing it. And you hear that about 1 or 2 guys every year. It feels like he's one of them this year. And generally the track record of the guys you hear that about is, hey, it's 2019 J.K. Dobbins. Hey, it's, Marvin Harrison before his freshman year. When you hear that about guys, that generally is something that pays off on the field. We saw it paying off during the practices we got to see. I think you saw it paying off during the spring game. And boy, if Ohio State has a substantially better defense this year, and I think that's within the realm of possibility. It doesn't have to be the 85 Bears, but if if they have gone from a terrible defense 2 years ago to a okay-ish, although mistake-prone defense in 2022, if they can go to a very good to great defense this year, well, that's going to make up for if there are, if they do end up having some concerns on offense. Well, you can adjust those sliders a little bit.
I would also say it's good for corners to have insomnia. You don't want them sleeping.
You do not want them. Well, you were sitting on that one for a long time.
You kept talking. So my apologies. But another player who really stood out, CJ Hicks. Obviously in the starting lineup because Steel Chambers is injured. He had a PBU. He had another one. It should have been a pick 6 where he jumped a route from maybe like Caleb Brown. It was in a slot. He's in the he's just everywhere. And Ryan Day talks about players flashing and being consistent. And there's a difference between the two. And he said he's flashing more. And a lot of what they saw today is what they've seen in the spring. And if that's what he continues to be, and the question I asked Ryan Day, how do you find snaps for him? How do you keep him out of the lineup? And I know everybody's like, he should be starting. He's not going to be starting in front of Steel Chambers. I will continue to say that. I don't see that happening. But you've got to find ways to get him on the field, like they did with like Baron Browning and other guys, that you just got to play 13 or 14 guys, and not even including the defensive line that rotates. Like, you've got to play more than 2 linebackers, and they will with Cody Simon. But you've got to, the back 7. Is it a back 12? Is it a back 13? That sort of thing.
Yeah, it does feel like at all 3 levels of the defense, there are some questions still. But you go back a couple of years, and linebacker was a major area of concern when you had, Pete Werner and Tuff Borland and Justin Hilliard and all those guys left after the 2021 season. Boy, was that just last year? No, that was 2 years ago. That was after the 2020 season. Man, time flies. But yeah, what you had, that was a major hole, and it was like, okay, is it going to be Dallas Gant and Kayvon Pope and those guys? And the answer was no. And they had to kind of find who it was, and then to go from there, where you kind of had some real concerns because there were some misses in recruiting and some development issues probably, to where they are now, where it feels like if they had to play Cody Simon and CJ Hicks as the starters, that's probably a pretty okay lineup. And then you have 2 guys who were presumably ahead of them. And, CJ Hicks is someone we've talked about in terms of the jack position, which we've talked about this before, but they didn't do anything with that this spring because Mitchell Melton was out. So that's still to come. But, in terms of finding a role, it may be a rotational linebacker spot. It may be, hey, you're going to also take 8 snaps a game at the jack position, and Mitchell Melton's going to take 20 or whatever it is. There are opportunities out there, and as we've seen with Sonny Styles last year in the playoff, if the talent is there, they're going to find a way to get you on the field.
And Gabe Powers also made some plays against the run in this one. People got a chance to see Kenyatta Jackson. I think they got a chance to see what we've been talking about this spring in terms of his ability to rush the passer. And what I saw from him quite a bit was he was also just bull rushing, and he couldn't necessarily do that in the past because he wasn't strong enough. But he was giving Josh Fryer some fits and Zen Mahalski and Tigger Sabola. And I think, I don't know how many sacks he finished with. I know he had at least 1. Hopefully he got a second in there, and then that was it. But just another in the group of pass rushers. And again, I'll be interested when we do a rewatch. Just, there's going to be so much focus on the defensive ends against the offensive tackles, and see, like, just, was it as bad as it seemed? Was it as okay? And whose fault was it? Coverage, sack, those sorts of things.
Well, if you look at the stat sheet, there are only, and we have gotten a photo of a corner of the stat sheet. They didn't have the live stats today like they normally do, so we can't say quite as authoritatively as we normally can. And Lord only knows how official these stats are actually going to be when we do see them. But according to the photo of the corner of the stat sheet that we've seen, there were 5 sacks, and that's just on the offensive side of the ball. So it felt like there were more than 5 sacks during the course of that game. I mean, there were enough times the quarterback was running and ran for 3 yards, or was flushed out of the pocket immediately. It felt like he was kind of under pressure a lot. And yeah, you just have to get one hand on him to get him down. But there were also times that he was under pressure. Both of those guys were under pressure more than 5 sacks would sort of suggest, I think.
Yeah, and I think they may have moved some of the carries a couple of yards up towards the line of scrimmage or something like that. It wasn't really a sack, that sort of thing.
Can they do that this fall?
I mean, if they can play Archie Griffin, they can pretty much do whatever they want.
Right. It was fun watching, the clock is running, and then Ryan Day tells the official stop the clock. And so you can do whatever you want during the spring game. It's basically like Nick Saban during the fall, but that's a different story.
It's like towards the end of the first half, you've got one offense using all of the timeouts, and the other offense is like, we used all of our timeouts. What about us? So yeah, the rules are kind of flippant and floating. But they did have actual rules for the scoring for the defense. Tom, could you please explain those?
Yes, the defense got points for sacks. I believe it was 2 points. Defense got points for 3 and outs, which I believe was 3 points. Forcing a punt might have been one. I think there were points for turnovers, but were there any turnovers? I don't think there was actually a turnover in the game.
Mhm.
I believe that it was going
Just
to be like
dumb
6.
downs.
Yeah, that was going to be like 6 points for a turnover. But other than that, mumble, voice trails off. But yeah, it was it was a game where it felt like the defense controlled the day. And the score, you take the 7 points on the Archie Griffin touchdown away, and listen, you can't take him off the board for real, Tony. But I think
You're taking it off the board because Pete Johnson didn't score.
I think you have to. I think you have to not necessarily rely on the geriatric tailback play for this fall. You may have to take that out of the offense for the fall. So, you take that out of it. I think that, what would the score end up 41-30 or something like that?
40-31.
40-31.
Keep
Okay.
it accurate.
So, if you 40-31, and then you take the 7 points off for the the sort of gimmicky thing, then it's 40-24. That kind of feels more in line with what that day kind of felt like.
Yeah, the struggles by the offense overall made it a pretty, I don't want to say boring game.
What's a Tressel-esque?
Yeah,
I have sat through spring games like this before,
Yeah.
and it has been a hot minute, but I have sat through spring games like this before.
Yeah, and what I'm probably going to do is go back and look at like all of the quarterback performances from all of these spring games. So because I'm already seeing on Twitter, Kyle McCord 18 of 34, he's they're in trouble, and
That's below 60%, isn't it?
it is. But please don't judge the future of Ohio State's offense off of one spring game performance by a quarterback. You will look like a fool if you go forward with that. Although, you know what? Go ahead, expose yourself.
Well, and let me we've talked about this on at least a couple shows recently, because this is an important data point. 2019 spring game, 4 for 13 for 132 yards and a touchdown for Justin Fields, and one of it was a 98-yard touchdown. So other than that, it's 3 of 12 for.
But when I said that very thing on Twitter, it was brought back to me. Yeah, but he was only on campus for a few months at that point. But also, Dwayne Haskins had like a 9 for 19. Somebody responded. I'm just going to tell you what's going on my Twitter feed, Tom. But
Please don't.
yeah, so Joe Burrow's had good days. Dwayne Haskins has good days, bad days. Like, don't put too much stock into one quarterback performance when you are still not sure about your offensive line. You're missing Emeka Egbuka and Julian Fleming, and Marvin Harrison plays for 2 or 3 series. Like, I mean, come on, it's like yelling at somebody for going into a store and not being able to afford stuff. It's like, well, I left my wallet in the car, and the chain, my change is at home. Like I'm able to pay, I just don't have it with me right now. I'm good for it. Can you spot me?
So the IOU would be instant offense upgrade. That's what it'll be. But yeah, I think this is sort of the natural inclination is to take the negative performance by the offense or the kind of sluggish performance of the offense and go quarterback. And when you have an unproven quarterback in there, okay, I understand. But also you have to understand there's some context there. You're not generally going to be able to run the ball consistently during a spring game. You're not, the offensive line is obviously a significant concern, and you're missing some of your offensive, some of your very best offensive weapons. So,
what would you feel better about, the offense lighting up the defense or what you saw today?
Well,
I'm asking the fans.
Yeah, here's the thing. Let me tell you what the comments would look like if the offense lit up the defense, because. How many times would you see fire Jim Knowles if that was the case?
Well, and we didn't get Jim Knowles here, so just imagine the outrage there as well. Kevin.
And Devin Radcliffe, that I'm gonna pop on, and you'll be able to hear him, and you guys can have a little back and forth.
So there's Devin Radcliffe. Devin, what'd you see today that you caught your eye that you thought stood out?
I think you guys have hit on a pretty good job already. And you were just talking about it. Defensively, they looked like a cohesive unit. I think is the big picture takeaway. I know there's going to be a lot of angst over the offensive line play and the offense not really hitting any big plays in the pass game necessarily. But, with the Ohio State offense, since Ryan Day, it's going to be an explosive offense that's going to get you a bunch of points. So the fact that this defense was able to put up the performance it did, now granted the offense was without a couple assumed returning starters. Nevertheless, they still did what they were supposed to do and keep them out of the end zone until the Ohio State offense got desperate and had to go get the only 2-time Heisman Trophy running back to punch it in. So, when the offense gets that desperate, the defense is putting on a good show.
Well, and Devin, we know you're a sort of defensive coach at heart, and not just at heart, like literally a defensive coach. I guess as a defensive guy, kind of run us through what you saw, because Ryan Day talked about the fact they didn't blitz at all. What did you see in terms of stunts and twists up front, other ways they disguised the coverage today? How much did they change things up in terms of various coverages? What did you see? Because I know you were at the game, but with your family, so sometimes you're going to get popcorn too. So among the stuff you did get to see, what did you see out there?
I think we potentially got a good look at what Ohio State thinks its base defense is going to be this season. Obviously the 4 down front, which everyone's talked about all offseason, jack or no jack. On paper, this is the potential to be the best defensive line Ohio State's had in quite some time. I mean, starting on both edges, you had the number 1 and number 2 defensive end prospects in the same class. The defensive tackles were all highly regarded guys. So if they're rounding into form and developing, this defensive line should really be something special this year. You saw a lot of single high coverage, which, but it was rotating which guys was back there single high. You saw they didn't get really too carried with any blitzes or stunts necessarily. Again, it was pretty vanilla. We did see him change up the coverage a little bit, but big picture, I think we got an idea of what Jim Knowles thinks his base defense is going to be this year, if nothing else, out of this game.
You see Tyleek Williams and Hero Canoe, I thought, flashed a few times in there on the interior. Mike Hall, we know what he can do, but yeah, Ryan Day said he's not concerned about the defensive line at this point. Just he wants some more depth there, but you figure that'll come. But the starters need to perform well, and based on what we saw today, I'm pretty sold on the tackles at this point.
Yeah, I'd agree with you there, and I think the depth is there. The depth, I'm trying to think off the top of my head here. You've got Williams, Hill, and Hamilton.
Hamilton did well.
Yeah, all 3 big-time guys have played a lot of snaps, but you need those young guys to step up, be able to spell, because I'm assuming it's going to be a 3-man rotation for the most part between those top 3 we just mentioned, and you like to get a 4th guy in there so you can have a true 2 deep there. Defensive ends, we know Caden Curry flashed last year, and the big talk obviously was the big joker, the name escapes me at the moment, big number 97. Really looks like he could be something this year as well.
Kenyatta Jackson, yeah, he's been one of the talk of the spring, basically. What time do you need to head out of here, Tom?
As long as you're good with talking to the good folks out there, I'm fine.
Because we do. There's only so much to talk about with the spring game, but the defense, I think, obviously is the story. And I don't know if I see there's a super chat there.
Yeah, let's get to the super chat. It's from Philip Pulio. Am I the only one that was mildly irritated at how the announcer kept pronouncing names wrong? Was it the announcer in the stadium or the announcer on TV?
I'm assuming we're talking about the TV.
I'm assuming TV. I think Bob would get it right.
Yeah, Bob Kennedy on the stadium does a pretty good job. PA in the press box, 50-50. But it is what it is on spring game broadcasts. It's they do their best, but it's spring training for the broadcast teams as well. And
we have the final stats. I wanted to get a thought from Devin on this. Ohio State credited with because Ohio State played Ohio State. The band was marching out today saying, "Go Ohio, beat Ohio," and it's like you could probably do something else with that. But anyway, 10 pass breakups today, and we heard all spring, Devin, about Jim Knowles talking about defensive backs getting their hands on the ball more frequently, and it feels like you saw that today. What is that a function of? Is that a function of them being more confident in the defense and their reads and getting better breaks on the ball, or what leads to, or is that just better technique? What leads to guys getting their hand on the ball more?
Being in position. You just hit the key phrase there, breaking on the ball. Being in position to break on the ball and make a play. And obviously, I'm sure it was a big point of emphasis this year, this offseason with these guys. So they really didn't seem to make a lot of those plays last year when they were in position to. So I'm sure it was a big point of emphasis with the coaches going back and figure out how they can get their guys to make those plays. Now, the next progression, which would be really cool to see, and you heard Coach Cooper talk about the clinic, is getting your hands on into interceptions. And that's when you can really break an offense's back, is when you turn those into interceptions and flip the field and get the ball back to your offense.
One other interesting note from the final stats now that we now have, there were 5 sacks. 3 of them came from the interior of the defensive line, not the ends. So Hero Canoe had 1, Kenyatta Jackson had 1, Caden Curry had 1, Ty Hamilton had 1, and Tyleek Williams had 1. Are you a little surprised, Devin, to have 3 of them coming from inside when tackle is kind of the big concern area, it sounds like right now, and they feel like the guards are maybe the strength of the offense?
I think it speaks more to how explosive the Ohio State defensive tackles are, more than is an indictment of the Ohio State offensive line, because we saw last year, Mike Hall Jr. there, he led the team in sacks with, I think, 5 last year, and he was playing 3 snaps a game, and I can't remember what game it was, but he played 4 snaps and 3 of them were sacks or something crazy like that. So, and Tyleek Williams is another one who's demonstrated he's a big explosive guy. So, no, it does not surprise me at all that the Ohio State defensive tackles were making those type of plays today, because we've seen them do it the past 2 years during the season as well.
Yeah, a couple of years ago, they had the competition between the tackles and the defensive ends about who would have the most sacks, and the tackles won it 2 years ago. I don't know who won it last year. Maybe this will be the rubber match year 3, especially with these 4 juniors that they have, and the second-year guys starting to step up too, and not just the defensive ends, but like as we said, Hero Canoe in there. And I went into this game not expecting much from Hero, because we've seen him with the 3s, but he was making plays out there. So I don't know how. As Devin said, they need a 4th. I don't know if he can be that 4th. Jaden McKenzie was making some plays and getting in there as well, and he's a 5th-year guy who has really never played. And so I don't know that he's the number 4. And, Will Smith was out today, so we didn't get unfortunately, we didn't get a chance to see him. But they've got some options. I'm excited to see Caden McDonald when he gets to town. He's a different kind of defensive tackle. He's big, I think 325 pounds or so, but has some Tyleek Williams to him that I think people will see. Kevin, you got anything down there?
Yeah, Brian asking, is the defense better or the offense dropping off? And reminder, Brian is probably not a huge Ohio State fan.
So is the defense better or is the offense dropping off? I think
Fire Heartline.
Well, I think it's, first of all, do you remember back in the day when, this is a Tressel era thing where you would sort of hear the conventional wisdom was the offense is always a little behind the defense in the spring. So I guess, Devin, as someone who coaches, what, do you buy into that? And how much of that do you put on maybe concerns about the offensive line specifically, or, wide receivers missing, versus it's just the defense is ahead of the offense, sort of, that is just sort of the nature of spring football, versus, Brian, it's time to fire Brian Hartline and elevate Jim Knowles to the president of the university.
I think, I remember years ago now, I'm dating myself a little bit, that Troy Smith, going in his senior year, set the defense on fire in his one drive in the spring game. And so, it goes both ways. And I think this year, coming in the spring, I think if you're going to look at it, returning starters, defense was probably ahead of the offense. So I think that's something to do with it. The offense is doing a little bit more figuring out who's going to go where, and they're trying to get that on tape. And that's another thing we don't really necessarily talk about, is these coaches want to get stuff on film so they can go evaluate it. So yeah, Billy may not be your starting left tackle, but the coach may want to make sure and say, hey, maybe he's our starting left guard. Let's put him in there and see. And I'm just, obviously just making up a name here. Let's see what Billy could do. Let's throw him in this series. Okay, I've got, these 5 guys in here. I want to see what they look like running this play, if this is something we can continue. So, that's something to keep in the back of the head when you're looking at this game, is these coaches aren't calling it to win it. They're calling it to put it on tape and evaluate. So if you're looking at, units, there's probably a little bit more shuffle on the offense. Defense, they got a lot of returning starters, so they didn't probably necessarily need to do as much shuffling to find starters as they were trying to get better and develop develop in a more cohesive unit, where the offense is trying to figure out what their unit is still at this point.
I'm kicking myself a little, because as I'm thinking, I wish leading up to the game I would have asked, on a Twitter poll or something, which would you prefer, the defense outplaying the offense or the offense outplaying the defense? Because I'm guessing it would have been like 80-20, 85-15 defense outplays the offense. And so that when that happens,
No, not like that.
yeah, that's not what I meant. But I think this is what people would have wanted to see until they watched it.
Right. And, I think you have to right now be looking at how concerned would you be if it was the opposite. If Kyle McCord had come out and thrown for 6 touchdowns and 380 yards in the first half, if it was the 2021 Michigan State game and just absolutely raining touchdowns on the defense, how would you feel at that point? Because I think the answer is it would be panic city if that happened. And so you have to kind of take the converse of that as that is kind of good news, because it wasn't like the offense was completely helpless. The offense wasn't dominant. The offense was not up to the standard that we've come to expect from a Ryan Day offense, but also they moved the ball a little bit. They scored, they had a long touchdown run, they had a long touchdown pass. They had, this was not a great run. If this offense looked like a typical Ryan Day offense, I think people would be concerned. So now the fact that this doesn't look like a typical Ryan Day offense, you should feel good about the defense. And, we haven't gone through all of the opponents, but, where does this Ohio State defense rank in terms of the defenses that Ohio State will face this calendar year? I mean, it's probably top 3 at the least, right? So, okay, I think this is what ultimately you did want to see, even if it doesn't feel like it right now.
I want to talk about the crowd real quick. 70,000. Is this I think it's a statement that there are a lot of people who are like, prove it to me. Because this was the absolute perfect day to come and put 100,000 people in the stadium. This is, it feels like any other year you would have, but there are some people who are, I don't know, hurt. It's like, I don't, you have to, you owe me. And there's like something to the fact that there's 30,000 seats that would have been filled in a normal year with excitement. But I feel like excitement, you can almost measure the excitement by the weather times the divided by the empty seats, and realize, so it's 70% less excited than they normally are.
Well, that's kind of how sports generally works. Like if you look at a baseball team, you don't have your big attendance bump the year you win the World Series. You have your big attendance bump the year after you win the World Series, when everyone goes, oh, hey, they won the World Series. I want to go see them play next year. One of the spring games started getting big. The first big spring game I remember was 1997, and there were probably not as many people in the stadium as there were today. It was probably 50,000, which back then was mind-blowing. And that was coming off of a Rose Bowl championship, number 2 in the nation finish, which back then was considered a successful season. Crazy as that may sound. Now you go back. When were some of the huge spring games kind of in the Urban Meyer era? That was probably right around the national championship, right during the buildup of the Urban Meyer era, as they're his first season, his second season, as they're building towards the national championship season. And then after the national championship, and then you haven't quite gotten back to that level, and you've had some real close calls and all that. And so, that's just sort of the natural, that's kind of how this works in the sports business. And attendance also nationally for just about everything a little bit down. So that's a whole other thing. Devin, you got to come. You got to enjoy it with your family. I plugged earlier in the week, like, hey, if you have little kids, this is a great way to come and enjoy, take your kids to an Ohio State game for not very much money. What was your experience like?
Great seats in the shade. Family had a blast. It's like you said, tickets were really nice, and my boys are young enough where they're just starting to get into sports, but not quite sure what's going on yet. So the spring game was a perfect environment to take them to a football game, and where you get to enjoy it. And we had a great time. Weather was great. Really lucked out there. It's looking dicey there at the last minute, but no, we had a great time, great atmosphere. you were just, obviously just talking about it, but, still big old crowd. Really, when you think about big picture wise, 75,000 people to watch a practice is still pretty incredible. So no, we had a good time. We enjoyed it. So highly recommend it. Like you said, bring the young kids, have a good time.
I assume it'll be the most in the Big Ten.
Almost because the only one that would probably challenge is Nebraska or Michigan, and Michigan doesn't make a thing out of
No,
spring
theirs
ball
is so
for whatever
early
reason.
anyway.
Yeah.
The weather's still not good enough to get people in the seats.
Yeah.
How are we on?
I think we have
are
another
good?
super chat from Sam. Sam,
and we'll take a bite of Devin, and we'll finish. We'll go through with ours.
all right. So Sam wants to know, can we get some Blue Jackets thoughts from Tom? Well, let's see. I'm going to keep this so we can monetize it. Boy, for a team that has as long and storied a track record losing hockey games as the Columbus Blue Jackets, boy howdy, was it a little frustrating to watch them win games when there's all you have to do is lose. You have shown an incredible talent for losing hockey games over the years. Why, in the name of heaven, did you win that hockey game on Wednesday night, Thursday night? I mean, you have nothing. If this is when you put in your e-bug, you can make someone's dream come true and also improve your chances of getting Connor Bedard. Because Tony, I don't want to spoil the surprise, but they finished number 2 in the NHL's draft lottery order. They can slide no further than 3 spots. They can slide no further than 4th in the NHL's draft lottery. This is generally considered more or less a 3. There's a kind of a drop off after the top 3 pro players. Tony, do you think that DraftKings will offer a prop bet on the likelihood that the Columbus Blue Jackets slide to 4, because that is the furthest they can slide, because they won one stupid game this week and now are going to slide out of? Not that I am the most black-pilled Columbus Blue Jackets fan, because boy howdy have they done it to everyone in the fan base over the years, but man oh man,
So make
you
it
can
plus 600 and just throw all your money
sort
on
of see it coming, can't you?
Yeah. Let's have positive thoughts though.
What do you want to talk about, the offensive line or the Blue Jackets? Your choice.
Devin, I want to thank you for joining us. If you have any last thoughts on the game, if you don't, you can just say goodbye. It's up to you.
Thank y'all for letting me jump on. I appreciate it. I had a great time. As always, gentlemen, take care now.
All right, thank you, Devin. Thank you for jumping on. I didn't even ask him. He's like, I'm a team player.
That's awesome. Yeah, no, that's great. And Devin is one
Kevin's
of our.
always like, can I come on? Can I come on? He's like, Kevin,
No,
please.
please leave it to the professionals. Devin is for those who don't know, perhaps one of our X's and O's gurus at BuckeyeHuddle.com. He is a high school defensive coordinator, so he really knows the defensive side of the ball and talks a lot about that, and spends a lot of time on the board answering questions about, okay, what's the difference between a cover 4 and a cover 2, or when you talk about a zone blitz, what does that mean? So, this is just one of those things where we talk a bunch about the team, and Alex and Mark talk a bunch about the recruiting classes and all that kind of stuff. And we'll have plenty of recruiting stuff to talk about after this weekend. Commitment today, by the way.
Yeah,
Max LeBlanc. Blanc or Blanc?
Well, he's French, so LeBlanc.
LeBlanc, okay.
Once he gets here, it's LeBlanc.
Okay. Max LeBlanc. Blanc. He a tight end, class of 2024. He committed on Saturday. So we'll have coverage of that, I'm sure at BuckeyeHuddle.com.
At some point, we also have to talk about the new Big Ten commissioner.
Oh, yeah, we do.
We have not done that yet, but there will probably be some shows between now and the season.
I'm interested to hear. I think he's getting introduced this upcoming week, so maybe we let him tell us a little bit about himself, and then we can.
There you go. Anything else on the?
Yeah, start a couple questions. David Greenshield, how impressed were you guys with Chip at running back? Does he get more carries into the year? Now that 60-yarder or whatever, the defense kind of let up and let him get to the edge. They could have closed that off if they really, really wanted to, I think. But he's continued to impress every time we've seen him, and he's a hard runner. I think Ryan Nason has added weight and gotten faster, and he's obviously taking this seriously because this is essentially his contract year. He could come back if he wanted to for the COVID year, but maybe that would be a bad idea if Ohio State loses as many guys as they do, or he might be the one to be able to cash in. But completely impressed, and they've got 5 5 guys. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you've got
I mean,
5 scholarship guys there.
And Evan Pryor, once he comes back, what he can do, like the same question I asked you earlier in the month, like how many 20 carry games will this team have?
Probably not many, because you figure if guys are healthy, you're gonna keep rotating those guys through, because you have. It's not just, well, we got to keep everyone happy. You got to feed all the goldfish. Like, no, you've got to.
Tony Alford got mad at me.
I heard. You came to me with tears in your eyes and you said, no. But I mean, yeah, if you want to take Chip Trainum 65-yarder off the board, okay, then he had 7 carries for 45 yards, which works out to just north of 6 yards per carry if you take the long one out. That I think is very representative of what we saw earlier in the spring. I think Dallin Hayden has been very impressive this spring. He was not as impressive. He had 12 carries for 30 yards, 2.5 per on Saturday. But, Chip Trainum was probably even better than we've seen him over the course of the spring. But, that's another spot where I feel like what we have seen so far this spring more or less matched up with what you saw in the stadium on Saturday.
I'm just incredibly curious to see how those carries work out once Travion Henderson and Mayan Williams and Evan Pryor are involved.
Wingman Ted, since you guys have seen more practice than any of us, is Kyle underthrowing a consistent concern?
Kyle McCord has looked fine every time I've seen him, and he did not have a lot of time today, so he's thrown on the move quite a bit. So I don't know that I've seen enough to see any tells in terms of what is a consistent throwing it, underthrowing it or whatever, because one of the things, he's making some long throws from one side of the field to another and still building up the experience there. But we'll go back and watch, obviously, but I don't really have any concerns about Kyle McCord.
No, I think Kyle McCord is going to be at least a solid Ohio State Ryan Day quarterback, or Devin Brown, whoever it ends up being. It feels like the talent is there, the system is there, the track record of development is there. They'll be fine. I think, if you're going to be concerned about a position, it wouldn't be quarterback. It would be just position group. I think offensive line is where you look, and there are solutions there as well.
And a better offensive line makes the quarterbacks better.
Oh, absolutely.
Wingman Ted, again, what are your thoughts about the Coach Huddle Conference with Day, Meyer, Cooper, and Tressel from the
Yeah, I think it's very cool. It's the first time that they've all gotten together on the same stage. Obviously, tons of stories to tell and to share from that. But I think there's also you get together, and those are the only people who understand what you're going through.
It's like the story of the president, the outgoing United States president leaves a letter in the drawer of the Resolute desk, basically saying, "Good luck, we're all counting on you." Basically, like you've heard of some of them in the past, and it's always no one will know what you are going through except for the few chosen men who have yada yada yada, and that's kind of Ohio State head coach. You can think you understand the pressure and the stress and it was practice, and 75,000 or whatever people came to watch your team practice, and that is just not a thing that coaches. That doesn't happen in the NFL, really. I mean, how many times they force people to buy tickets to NFL preseason games, and they don't have 75,000 at most of them. So, this is a very, very, very unique position. And that is a very small group of guys who can, the challenges are a little different than they were in John Cooper's era, but, he was, you remember him talking about everyone wants to gamble with my chips and all, they're with us winter tie. This is, some of the things haven't changed.
Everybody wants to gamble with my biting pumps. But no, it's not even in addition to the 75,000, it's also why only 75,000, like that sort of thing.
GOJ, if Kyle had a mature O-line, he would have wowed everyone.
Yeah, I mean, you give him time to throw, and any quarterback should be completing 70% of the passes. Any good quarterback, and because they do throw short stuff as well. But yeah, if you don't give him time, what happens?
You don't. The defensive back don't have to cover very long, and also then sometimes you get someone waves a hand in your general direction, and then the play's over.
What did you see Lathan Ransom or Josh Proctor do anything today?
I don't remember them doing much of anything.
And that's
just
not
'cause
their
it just,
fault.
right. It was just it was a little bit like when we went to watch Sonny Styles play
Mhm.
in high
Yeah,
school
yeah.
when he was playing for Pickerington, and they were playing at Newark, and this was the 2020 season, I believe. Yeah, it was the 2020 season, and there was like no one there. And we went to watch, Sonny Styles play, and he's playing safety. And Newark could not get anything going on offense because Pickerington's loaded with defensive D1 players on the offense and the defensive line, and it was just like, yeah, they're not going to be able to throw the ball 15 yards downfield to have an interception and run it back. So it was just kind of, it was a little like that where you couldn't get something going consistently enough to really threaten deep.
Yeah, so many times last year, everybody saw the safeties. The fact that you didn't see them today, I think, is a good sign.
Yeah, this is like long snappers. If you don't know the long snapper's name, that's a good thing. If you don't see the safeties, that's not necessarily a bad thing.
Speaking of long snappers, credit to John Froman for some good snaps and getting down there and making a tackle on Jaden Ballard.
Super chat from Philip Julio, just saying, if you aren't on Buckeye Huddle, you should be. Awesome group. No, I'm not paid to say this. In fact, I paid to say this.
We need more people like Philip. That's my takeaway.
Yeah, thank you very much for that. I can't argue with that. I think he's
it's 10 of 10.
very well said. Well spoken. Is that okay?
Wingman Ted, did Tom get a picture of Carnell Tate getting blasted from a crazy late hit into the stadium wall in the first half? Targeting much?
I was on the opposite side of the end zone. I do have a picture of it. Was that Jermaine Matthews, I think, was the defensive back in coverage? It was coming towards, it was like the bottom left of the TV screen. Yeah, I do have a picture of that, him hitting the wall. He got hit, and then he hit the wall real hard, and it was like, oh boy, that didn't look good. And then he was a little slow getting up, but seemed okay. And then caught a touchdown later. I didn't get a picture of that, but I did get a picture of him getting hit in the wall.
Jermaine Matthews also had a pretty good day, I thought. Yeah.
I think a good ending comment here is from Odysseus. Can't read too much into a spring game.
True fact.
Now that the show is over, absolutely correct. Please don't read too much into it, but read about us reading into it.
And please join us later this week for 100 Things We Learned During the Ohio State Spring Game, an ongoing series on the Buckeyes Tomorrow Morning podcast, probably.
From now until, say, mid-May?
I will share. I know you guys love the behind-the-scenes, look behind the curtain stuff. Tony, on Friday afternoon, published a 100 Things I'm Looking Forward to Seeing During the Ohio State Spring Game, and I texted him that I was personally offended and a little bit aggrieved that he had waited until I had recorded all of the morning shows before he published that, because that would have been a whole series of morning shows and I wouldn't have had to think at all, which it's a little spiteful.
But now, you being who you are, like, well, we'll review them next week and see how you did.
And one more from It's Just Me Tim 79. Who won the bold predictions?
We have not scored them yet because we just got the stats. I think Tony is doing pretty well.
I know I have one.
You got one.
I think I got CJ Hicks. CJ Hicks had to have two because he had a PBU. He had two PBUs, so he had a tackle for loss.
He had.
So I think I had two.
CJ Hicks had one tackle for loss and two PBUs. So yes.
Did Sonny Styles get his three?
Had two PBUs.
No tackles for loss and nothing else.
But regular tackles are impact plays.
No.
Let's see.
You got Kyle McCord.
I got Kyle McCord. No, did not have anyone with 2.5 sacks.
And no 4 sacks between those two defensive ends.
Did not have any interceptions. No one had 107 yards receiving.
Mm-hmm.
So it sounds like Tony.
And this was, we decided, for the kind of shame for Chicago.
Well, that's fine. They're not doing anything in Chicago this year, so that's fine. Yeah.
Right.
So, as we said, you can't really take anything away from the spring game.
So that will then do it. I want to thank you all for joining us. As always, you can find us at BuckeyeHuddle.com. Become a member. Say hello to us there. Talk spring game wrap-up, spring game thoughts. Recruiting for sure. And again, we're going to be doing X's and O's all throughout the summer as well. So find us at youtube.com/BuckeyeHuddle as well for stuff like this. Hit the bell to be notified when we go live, when we drop new videos, drop interviews, and all sorts of good stuff. So thank you all for tuning in, and we'll talk to you guys later.